Alright YouTube, so this is my 1987 Harley FXRC. It is one of 750 with a blue frame. I just repainted the frame. This is the factory color. I'm going to be swapping a twin cam in it, so I'm going to be doing a series of videos on the progression of the build, mostly just putting stuff back together at this point. The twin cam is over there on the floor. Frame is suspended from the ceiling with some baling wire. I'm going to be taking it down soon and bolting the stuff in it. Alright, so we got the frame down on the floor now with an excessive amount of painter's tape on it. Getting ready to put the engine and transmission in it. Just want to protect it as much as I can there. Avoid as many scratches as we can. I'm going to go ahead and get the transmission up on the bench so I could put the block off plate on the bottom. I'll set it over to the side here. Put the engine in, then we'll mate them both up. Alright, so this is my 2001 Touring transmission. To run it in an FXR, you either have to, as a lot of people know, cut the cross member that runs through the middle of the frame, or you have to build a block off plate for the original oil pan and run the stock oil bag on the FXR. I am opting to run the stock oil bag on the FXR. I think it looks better personally, and I don't have to cut the frame. So to me, it's a win-win. They do sell a specialized oil pan to neither cut the frame nor run the oil bag, but that's like $2,000, I think. So when you look at the bottom of this transmission, this is the engine oil sits under here. This is the hole that goes to the transmission casing. So trans fluid's in here, or in the case of a Harley, gear oil. And all in this area is where the oil for the engine sits. Since I'm going to be running the oil bag, I no longer need this area. So I'm going to be blocking it off. And I made myself a custom block off plate. You could buy a block off plate, but I think it's like $200 depending on where you get it. And it's literally only $30, $40 worth of aluminum. So I opted to make my own since I have a mill. So this is the block off plate I made myself. I just took a piece of, I believe, 3/8 aluminum. I took the old oil pan and laid it out on the aluminum and traced it to get the bolt pattern perfect. Put it on the mill, milled out the shape, drilled and tapped this hole. And this is, again, this is to drain the transmission fluid. So this hole needs to be here. And this isn't as simple as just drilling and tapping. There's a special angle right here to get this O-ring to seal properly. You could look that up. That's an SAE spec. But you kind of got to make a specialized tool to make it happen. It's not that hard. I'm sure you could just wing it, with something else. But for me, it took an extra half hour or so to do it right, so I did. Milled this down, and then I powder coated it. I actually milled all these surfaces after I powder coated. I just did this for looks. Looks like the right one. And again, this is the more critical hole. This one's not going to have oil behind it anymore, so kind of doesn't really matter. It just needs to seal around here. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on here. Help hold it in place a little bit, help seal it a little bit better. This helps a little bit keep any oil seepage away, just because oil kind of has a hard time pushing through a layer of grease. So I'm just going to do it around here. If this was still holding oil back, I'd maybe do this around the whole pan. Alright, so I pushed the transmission much further back than it will sit when it's in the frame. That way it gives me plenty of room to get the engine in. Alright. Alright, that's going to come about 2 inches forward or so. And also the engine's super dusty. It's been sitting a while I got the frame all squared away. So before I bolt this to the engine, I want to go ahead and match the length that came out of the other bike. I left this more or less exactly where it was when I took the bike apart. But the old motor was an Evo, so I don't necessarily know if it's going to be perfect for the twin cam going in there, but we can adjust. Just want a ballpark. Looks about right. Reverse thread. Alright, just hand tight for now. You can see on here the difference between these rod ends. This one's got a little groove machined into it. That's how you know that that's the left hand thread end. These are final tightening when the engine's in. It's moving on us. This actually came off the factory Evo engine. I just powder coated it gloss black, and I drilled two holes were already existing. I drilled 2 more to fit a twin cam coil. So I wanted to keep the twin cam coil is normally mounted a little differently. Very good job machining these. Much lighter than the factory steel ones too. If you look, it's got an R and an L, obviously right and left, but that just depends on... This just tells you where the little dowel pins it comes with, where those go. So obviously you put one in each, and then whichever side you put it in, that's the side you put it on. That is the size and part number you need for, I think it's a it might be 87 and older. At some point they changed these to coarse thread. These are fine thread. Something I didn't film was installing the pivot shaft and the swing arm. It's a real challenge to get everything aligned and try to do it while you're filming. It really wasn't happening. I tried and tried, and I finally had to give up on the filming. So the problem is this engine, since this front mount is on an angle, it tends to want to slide forward with the weight on it. So you got to find a way to jack it backwards and put the pivot shaft in at the same time. So you kind of have one arm all the way here prying up the engine, and another one trying to line the swing arm up at the same time you push the pivot shaft through. Be a lot easier with two people. Be a lot easier if you were not shy about putting a pry bar between the frame and the engine and don't mind nicking the engine a bit. So if you take a look through the front motor mount hole, you could tell it's not lined up very well. So there's a few ways you could do this. You could go ahead and hook this up over here and use wrenches to push the whole motor to the side, but that doesn't really help you with the front and back. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to line it up front and back, and hopefully at the same time left and right a bit. But I'll go ahead and show you what I had planned to move it forward and back, since it's kind of a pain just to move the whole motor and transmission back at the same time and not move the frame. Since I tore this frame all the way down and painted everything, I went ahead and removed the old bearing races. They had 42,000 miles on them. A taper bearing in this kind of use doesn't have a lot of stress on it, so it was probably fine. But I went ahead and removed the race anyway. I'm going to be installing a new race. A lot of people, they just replace the roller bearing itself, which, you know, it works, but you should be replacing the races at the same time. And what you're looking for is you want to buy the Timkins pretty much. At least I do. They're the best bearings in my opinion. The set 14 is the proper size. You look there, it's got the race and the bearing part number if you need them separately. I like to put a touch of grease to help it slide in without binding up. Looks like it's going pretty straight. I'm going to go ahead and drive it the rest of the way in with a socket so I can get it fully recessed. You can see there's still a gap down here. If you don't have a socket this big, if you still have the old bearing race around, that actually tends to work a little bit better because it's the exact same diameter. The problem is it's on an angle, so it's not going to hold itself in place, but just watch your fingers. So another reason I like to put grease underneath, or behind the seating surface rather, is that you'll see it squeeze out when you have it fully seated. It's a little tough to see, but these little beads of grease came out from underneath. Looks like I nicked up the paint a little bit right here, but that's okay. There's a dust cover that goes over this anyway. You're never going to see in there. Bike is up on the lift now. This video is going a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Next video, I'll show you how I align the engine and transmission to the frame, install the oil bag, hopefully get the rear wheel and front forks on. So until then, thanks for watching.